Welcome to How They Do That. I'm your host, Scott Waldron, and here is a little preview of what you're going to hear today.
But you're going to say yes, and not even say yes, but actually suggest it to come on my podcast for 35 minutes where I can ask you as many questions as I want to about whatever I want to, and I can publish that to the world so they know that you spent that much time with me. And I was like, boom, clicked for me. So I emailed him and said, can I have 3 minutes of your time? I just have one quick question for you. And he said, hey man, I have a mastermind. People pay me $30,000 a year to be in this group. And so that they can jump on one-on-one calls like this. It would be unfair to them.
Travis is one of those people that you sit there and scratch your head and go, wow, you did that? Okay. How did you do that? No, okay. Well, if you did it, I guess I can too. Right. And that's what he wants you to understand. And he's going to teach us a little bit about that in this episode of how do we really connect with anyone in order to get them on our podcast, in order to get them on our show and feature them as a guest on our show. Many of you have podcasts. Many of you are thinking about building podcasts. And this episode is going to give you a little bit of that insight on how do I land that guest that I never thought I could get. Okay. That is a question that's come up in my mind for several years as I've been doing my show. And lo and behold, I have somebody like Travis on my show who I never thought I would get, but bam, here he is. Travis Chappell is a door-to-door. He was a door-to-door salesman that then turned founder, investor, speaker, and podcaster. He's the founder and CEO of Guestio.com. If you haven't been to Guestio, check it out. It's a really cool platform. I learned about it from John Lee Dumas, who was on my show years ago. John Lee Dumas, if you don't know who JLD is, you should listen to that episode too. He is one of the OG founders or godfathers of podcasting, I guess we should say. I say godfather, but he's not 84. He's a younger dude than that. So anyway, Guestio is a high quality guest and show booking marketplace in the industry that you can use to book and also be featured on podcasts and be found. He's also the co-host of top ranked podcast, Travis Makes Friends, and Figuring It Out, where he's interviewed people like Shaquille O'Neal, Grant Cardone, Josh Peck, Molly Bloom, Jasmine Starr, and people like John Maxwell and hundreds of others. In addition to being a guest on top podcasts like Bigger Pockets, EO Fire, and Born to Impact, Travis has been featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, TechCrunch, Bloomberg, and dozens of other media outlets. He is everywhere and he's doing some really cool stuff. And I know you're going to get something out of this. So here we go. Travis, so good to have you, man. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, yeah, of course, dude. Thanks so much for having me.
Tell us, give us the background, where you are, where you're landed, where you are. We're going to get to your show in just a second because you've got some amazing people. I would like to hear what you've gathered from those interviews of the people that you've had on your show. But first of all, tell us a little bit of your story.
Yeah, man. So to make it kind of 30,000 foot view, a quick wrap up here. I grew up in SoCal in I go back and forth with what I call it all the time, a religious bubble, cult, community, whatever you want to call it. Graduated kindergarten on the same campus I graduated college from. So I went there from the time that I was 3 to church, and then I was enrolled in kindergarten. Went to the same campus for church and school from kindergarten all the way through senior year of high school. Then they had a ministerial college on the campus. I enrolled in that after high school and went to all 4 years of college there as well. So basically my entire childhood was lived on a 40-acre campus in a fundamentalist Christian group, fundamentalist Baptist group in Southern California. So when I came out of that, I essentially was starting my network from scratch. I didn't really know anybody. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought I was going to be in ministry. I figured I didn't want to be in ministry. Some cracks in the dam started forming around that entire belief system for me. And I was essentially a 22-year-old married young person with a mortgage to pay and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, which was kind of a problem. So I did the only thing I knew how to do at the time, which was door-to-door sales. So I had done door-to-door in college to make some extra cash, and I was pretty good at it. So I just kept doing door-to-door, did 100% commission, door-to-door. At the time I started in solar, then I moved to alarms, and ended up in water purification. And somewhere along that journey, I basically was like, I don't want to be doing door-to-door for the rest of my life. So what do I do now? I know that I don't want to be doing the thing that I'm good at, which is door-to-door. And I know I don't want to be doing the thing that I got qualified to do and have my degree in, which is ministry. So, like I said, I have a mortgage, I have a wife, I have bills to pay. I can't just go sleep on my friend's couch while I try to figure it out. So I got to do something in the meantime. And that was kind of the first, I wouldn't call it rock bottom because it implies that I was sleeping on the streets and stuff. And, it was just rock bottom in terms of like, I was so lost and so clueless and had no idea what I was doing with my life. And that was the first time I dove into personal development, self-development, self-help, started reading and learning and trying to find kind of the next path for me. I always had an interest in business. I was pretty good at selling. And so I figured like, hey, I'd probably go into this world, but I didn't know anybody that was good at it. And I, was a young dummy, but I was smart enough to know that like, hey, if you want to get really good at this thing, you want to go make, millions of dollars in your career, you should probably go meet somebody who's made millions of dollars before. Cause I had never met anybody that was wealthy at that time in my life. And so that was kind of that combined with the fact that I was listening to a ton of podcasts and I really liked them as a form of education, even comparatively to reading or YouTube or whatever else. Those two things combined is what eventually led me to start a podcast called Build Your Network. It was all about how to build relationships with high quality people. And it was more of a discovery process for myself than it was me being the expert teaching people. So all I did was interview people about how to go get in touch with high quality people. And then, that was kind of the snowball that led to podcast coaching, consulting, teaching other people how to run podcasts, podcast production, business, a podcast education company. We sold a bunch of courses online about how to start podcasts. And then all of that eventually led to Guestio, which is the software company that I have that connects guests and hosts together, as well as an agency that I have. We represent guests and we go get them booked on shows. And then all through that, I still have my own show, just rebranded from Build Your Network to Travis Makes Friends. We're on episode like 918 now or something like that. Been able to talk to some pretty cool people on that. So pretty much complete 180 from 22-year-old Travis to 31-year-old Travis. But a lot of stuff happened, in the in-between time. So there's the quick, synopsis for you.
That is it. So let me ask you this. So I don't hear about many people that go all the way through college. Now you get the pre-K through 12 thing. I've seen that, right? But then just stay on and go through college that way. That's hardcore, man.
It was pretty wild.
Is there anything I want to know? I'm just curious. Like, is there anything from that you have used? I mean, just from that life experience, from that whatever, like that you could pick out and say, actually, because of that, I was actually able to do this.
Oh, for sure, man. That's what I tell people all the time is like, there's pros and cons to how everybody's raised. You know what I mean? You can either choose to focus on the cons or you can choose to focus on the pros. And a couple of those pros, like the main one that always sticks out to me in my head, because, when you grow up like that, the heroes of that world, the superheroes of that world, the people who are idolized are all the preachers. They're the pastors, they're the missionaries, they're the people that are up on stage. And our church was a pretty big church. Like, when we started going there when I was 3, it was maybe like 1,500 people, something like that. By the time I left, it was like 7,000 church members. It was a 40-acre campus. There was a full K through 12 school, maybe 400 to 500 students there, a full ministerial college with 1,000 students there, publication ministry, several multi-million-dollar buildings. Like, it became this kind of mega church in this weird, strict fundamentalist group. And so we brought in really great speakers, and to this day, some of the best speakers I ever watched were in that world. And so when you grow up kind of idolizing those types of people, that's kind of what, if you have any desire to do those things, those are the kind of the skills that you start trying to work on when you're pretty young. So I was in preaching camp, which is basically just it was like a week-long thing in the summer that the college would put on. They would use it as a recruiting tool to bring students to the college, and it would be like 7th through 12th grade. So my summer before my 7th grade year, I was at preaching camp, which is essentially just a college level homiletics course, which is a how to preach course taught in a 7-day time frame. So you're just in class for like 8 hours a day. And at the end, you stand up and you preach a sermon. So the first time I ever got up and started talking in front of people, I was 12. And from that point on, I was pretty hooked in it. And I was constantly just getting up in front of people. I was always talking. I was always preaching. I was always speaking. I was always doing, a humorous interpretation act for fine arts or a duet acting speech, or I was Ebenezer Scrooge for our high school play. And it's like our high school, a high school play is a high school play. But since our church had so many people in it, it was like we performed that for like over the weekend, maybe 1,500 to 2,000 people. You know what I mean? So we were singing all the time. Like you're always on the stage, on the platform if you wanted to be. And so I clocked in, hundreds of hours, if not thousands of hours on stage before I graduated college. And I think like that one skill by itself is, I think it's the thing that's most feared on this earth, other than dying is public speaking. Maybe even more than death is people have a fear of public speaking. And so for me to kind of eliminate a lot of that from my psyche before, like I said, I spoke in front of our church of 1,500 on a Wednesday night when I was 15. So like those types of things were obviously very helpful. It taught me how to not just communicate clearly and effectively, but how to communicate with people who are a lot older than I was, which was really helpful, especially at the beginning of my career being in sales, to be this 22-year-old kid. And I always was able to grow a beard. So people thought I was way older than I was because I looked it, but also because I carried myself with the demeanor of somebody who was a decade older than I was, because I was used to communicating difficult concepts to audiences of people who were twice my age. From a very young age. So, like I said, there's a lot of cons as well, but the pros, you try to focus on the pros, and that was definitely one of them.
That's so cool. Yeah. I mean, it's, so you were one of those kids, the 8th grade kid that had like full beard, and you're just going, what, where did you come from, man?
Yeah. I had,
how many grades were you held back? It's kind of like that question.
I was actually one of the youngest in my class as well. So I was like,
gosh, really?
It was like right before it was August 31st, my birthday. And I barely made it into the cutoff. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So I was one of the 3 or 4 youngest in my class. But yeah, I don't know what it is. Just some sort of gene.
Congratulations.
But it was funny because when I was a senior in high school and in college, actually, so it was a rule both in high school and college that you were not allowed to grow facial hair at all. So we had to shave every day. And like I said, even in college. So we would get actual demerits in college for not shaving. So when I was in college, I was like my junior year or something, I had shaved that morning and I was walking from like 3rd period, 4th period. And one of the teachers stopped me. She gave me demerits for having a 5 o'clock shadow. And I was like, I shaved this morning. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't, but what do I do about this? And so she actually suggested that I bring a razor with me to school and start shaving between 3rd and 4th period. And I was like, nah, I think I'll just take the demerits. So you're going to have to just start writing me up every day because this is ridiculous. I'm not going to do that.
Now you can thank God for all those demerits you got, because it's just like, it was a cruel joke.
That's right. That's right.
Playing on you, man. It's just like, I'm going to make your hair grow in 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then,
and you're going to get in trouble
with that, buddy. Yeah, live with that one. All right. So you went into selling some stuff and you got really good at it. I don't want to do this my whole life. So then you started branching into, I need to start hanging and figuring out how these people like build their empires and how do they do those things. How did you initially connect with some of these people that were able to influence you, teach you, mentor you in the ways of like building a platform or building something that you could then scale off of?
So the very first thing I did was I invested in coaching and masterminds, essentially group coaching. That was the very first thing that I did. It was just like, I don't know how to get in touch with these people, but I do know that they're offering this like coaching thing at their house this weekend. So that seems like a pretty good way to get in touch with them. You know what I mean? It's like there's.
So they were hosting it themselves, or they were in the mastermind with you?
They were the ones that were hosting it. Yeah. So when I was trying to start my podcast, I was like, how do I do this thing, and how do I get good at podcasting? And if I want this to do well, I'm going to treat it like a business. I'm not going to treat it like a hobby. And I tell everybody when they start podcasts, like you can treat it. A podcast has the ability to pay you like a business, but only if you treat it like one. It'll pay you like a hobby if you treat it like a hobby. So at the very beginning, I treated it like a business, and I invested into it. And I invested, I think most people underestimate the value of investing into yourself. When you don't have any assets, you are your only asset. Even when you do have a lot of assets, you're still your main asset. And so the people who are wildly successful, the people who have outsized versions of success, have invested in themselves to a much higher degree than those who do not have outsized versions of success, whatever that looks like. For some people, that's a Harvard MBA, but let me tell you, that's not cheap. You know what I mean? But for other people like me who weren't on a path ever to be able to go to a real college or university, for me, it looked like, hey, this person figured it out. Let me go pay them to tell me how they did it. And like I said, I was a young dummy and I didn't know a lot of things, but I was smart enough to know that if I get around people who've already done it, that they could probably shave a ton of time off of my learning curve and help me skip some of the steps of the process. And so that was the initial thing, was like, I just paid to get around people who had already done the thing that I wanted to do and done it very, very well. And we're still doing it to that day. So after that, the main connection tool for me, man, became my podcast. It was kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit, because my show is called Build Your Network and it was about learning how to connect with people. And so I didn't really even realize it until a couple of years in, because I would go on other people's shows and they would inevitably ask me questions about networking, because that was what my show was about. So they would think like, oh, this is the networking guy, the expert. How do, hey man, what's your number one tip on how to build relationships and whatever? And I would give some BS answer, and it was a real answer. It would be something like, learn how to add value to others, give without expecting anything in return. Like there were real things and good principles to keep in mind. But I was putting off like the number one answer that was kind of hiding beneath the surface. And the number one answer for me, the most practical advice I can give to anybody that's looking to completely rebuild their network or start from scratch or exponentially grow their connections in the next couple of years, was starting my podcast. I was interviewing 3 people per week. And so when you are having 150 conversations with high level people throughout the course of a year, and you fast forward that for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you can't help but grow some really great high quality relationships with some awesome people. And then the reason why the podcast rather than anything else is I realized it. I'll tell you this story, man. I realized it like right when I started my show. It was before I launched. I was reaching out to, there was 2 people that I had in mind that I really wanted to have on the show. One of them was, he was called the father of modern networking by CNN. And he's the founder of BNI, Business Networking International, which was Ivan Meisner, a really great guy. I reached out to him to be like, hey, this seems like a pretty great fit for my show. But I can't just ask him to come on my show because he's not going to say yes. So I emailed him and said, can I have 3 minutes of your time? I just have one quick question for you. And he emailed me back. And he said, I'm not going to jump on a call because I don't just jump on random calls with people. But if you email me your question, I'll shoot you a response. And I was like, all right, well, at least this gets the relationship going and maybe I can have him on at some point. So I emailed him the question, and he noticed in my email signature that I had a podcast on networking. And he goes, and he suggested, he goes, well, I see you have a podcast about this. Do you want to just jump on and have me on the show sometime? And I was like, okay, so wait a second. You're going to say no to a 3-minute phone call that nobody even has to know existed or took place. But you're going to say yes, and not even say yes, but actually like suggest it to come on my podcast for 35 minutes where I can ask you as many questions as I want to about whatever I want to. And I can publish that to the world so they know that you spent that much time with me. And I was like, boom, clicked for me. And within a day or two, it happened with another person where I had asked this guy the same exact thing. Can I have 3 minutes of your time? And he said, hey man, I have a mastermind. People pay me $30,000 a year to be in this group. And so that they can jump on one-on-one calls like this. It would be unfair to them if I allowed you to do that. And I was like, totally get it. Completely fair. Worked with the last guy. I have a podcast. You know what I mean? Any chance you want to jump on the show? And he was like, sure, let's do it. And I was like, oh my God, like that's crazy. So 2 people in a row who I viewed to be very high caliber, high quality people who I really wanted to have a conversation with, both said no to a less than 5-minute conversation with one question that nobody ever had to know about. And both said yes to doing an interview on my show, even though it had 0 listeners at the time, nobody to listen to it. Like it didn't matter. They just said yes. And so it brought me into this this magical universe where people said yes to getting my foot in the door. Because that's the most difficult part about connecting with people, is like getting your foot in the door. That's the hardest part. You know what I mean? And then second hardest part is once your foot's in the door, what are you going to do? And most people don't have a thing to do. And that's what prevents them from ever reaching out in the first place. So like, yeah, I'd love to talk to such and such person or that person or connect with this person or potentially do business with them in the future, but I don't have an ask for them right now. So it'd be useless for me just to reach out and say nothing of value and then not have anywhere to go from there. So having the podcast became like this perfect next step. and the perfect foot in the door, because it's just an innocent ask. It's just like, hey, can I have some of your time to ask you some questions for my podcast sometime? And so it became this kind of Trojan horse that I was able to use to get inside the walls of communication with somebody that would normally never give me the time of day, and then have this lengthy relationship starting, relationship building, a trust growing conversation with them. And then I could actually publish it, and then they would actually tell people about it. They would be like, hey, check me out on Travis's podcast. I was like, this is crazy. Nobody figured this out. Like, nobody's doing this for this reason, you know? So yeah, just it like the best thing I ever learned from that was just coincidentally, like I said, self-fulfilling prophecy, where I was starting the show so I could learn the techniques of trying to get in touch with people, when in reality, the very thing that I was doing to have those conversations became the thing that was actually the most valuable and useful piece of the puzzle for being able to do that exact thing. So yeah, start a podcast.
That, I think, is the theme here. Yeah. Holy moly. That's like, and I'll throw this out there, and I'll just tell you that when I started my show, it was how do I get in front of my target market easier, without looking like a sleazy salesperson, you know? So yeah. I was like, I can build some trust. I mean, people generally, I like to schmooze. I can talk, and people generally like me after they get to know me a little bit better. So maybe I'll just do that. And this is a good way to have a conversation. I can build my brand, my platform this way a little bit too. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to target my people. I started targeting people that I wanted to work with and having them on my show. And then I started to go, oh my gosh, like, this is so fun. Like, I'm really connecting with these people. I'm having a good conversation. I'm learning some really good stuff. And they're also part of my network now. And I've been able to reference them back, say, hey, remember me back on the show? Yeah. And they're like, oh yeah, totally. And we're able to connect. I just finished writing a book in December, and every single endorsement that came off of that endorsed me for that were people that I'd had on my show. Whether it was Mike Michalowicz, whether it was somebody, you know, the former CEO of Reebok and HBO Video. It was just like these people that I would have never had the chance to meet, or really like the opportunity. Like, why would I ever run into that person? You know, like, but it's created a really great platform. Now the show has become more of a, like, I've had authors on, and I'm having you on, and these people that like I would have never necessarily connected with that I'm now getting to. And that's awesome. So I'm just putting my hat in the ring, saying I agree with you. Amen, brother. Like, this is, it's the way I've built my network and built some really good connections.
You know, I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day, who they're a savvy business person. And so behind the scenes with Guestio, we're looking at doing this potential merger partnership with a big agency right now. And he was asking me about our investment structure, because we had raised a little bit over $1 million for seed funding for the software side of the platform. And I had never raised money before. I was never in entrepreneurship. I don't come from Silicon Valley. I don't come from money. There was none of those things that were there as a part of the equation. And so he was asking me about the deal structure, and I was telling him about the structure of the deal and the vehicle through which we raised the money, and then how we got the money in. And he was like, he's like, how did a country bumpkin Bible thumper like you figure out all of this stuff about this? Like, because he's a pretty savvy guy. He makes millions of dollars in his business every year, very profitable, doing it for a long time, a couple decades in business. And he was not familiar with the vehicle through which I was raising and the different things that I'd done for that raise. And he's like, how did you figure all this out? And he used that for that terminology. And I just laughed, and I was just like, my podcast, man. Like, it was just my podcast. It was just, when I went to raise, I made a list of the people who I had on my show, who I knew had experience doing those exact things, sent them an email and asked them if they'd jump on a quick call. That was it. And then I talked to 3 or 4 of them, all of whom were very highly successful people. A couple of them, you know, like I said, Harvard MBAs, worked on Wall Street, sold a company for $3 billion, moved on, raised money, exited, venture capital, private equity, like just different people in those different spaces. And I talked to enough of them to do enough research to get the idea, did some Google, you know, extra Google research on my own, and figured it out. But I would not have had any of that had it not been for having the podcast to begin with. Like that, those access lines would be completely shut off, and those people would not have wanted to spend any additional time with me. If that's the whole bottom line is like, you can get advice from those people that I got advice from, but it's, $5 to $10,000 per consulting hour. You know what I mean? Like they charge $100,000 a year for one-on-one executive coaching, but several of those people jumped on a dozen calls with me for free when I was starting my software company, just because we built a good enough relationship through when I had them on my show initially. That's unreal.
Can I throw this out to you? Can I I'm gonna poke the bear a little bit here. You ready? Okay, we'll throw this out there. You've had Shaq on your show. Okay, big name, big guy. How would you get Shaq on your show? Well, I'm just going to use this as a setup.
Okay? Sure. Warm network connection.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a short story.
Somebody else you've connected with said, "Hey, there's this guy," and Shaq was like, "Okay, I trust you. I'll go on this."
It was supposed to be a 5-minute FaceTime call, is what it was, and I ended up kind of leveraging it into a 20-minute podcast interview.
Okay, beautiful. So some of us, we may have that connection. Some of us may not have that warm connection. I will tell you on my side that some of those people that I've reached out to that I was like, oh my gosh, I don't ever expect this person to say yes. Some of them have said yes.
Oh, okay? Yeah. No, so if you ask me. And then
some of them.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, if you asked me how if you look at the 500 plus guests I've had on my show, what's been the most useful or effective method of reaching them? It's just cold DMs, just cold messages sent to them via Instagram, email, Twitter, whatever. Like, it's just reaching out and people saying yes, that you're just like, oh, sweet. It's like a total shot in the dark. You're like, this person's never going to even see this message, let alone get back to me and respond positively. And then 30 minutes you check your phone, you're like, oh, they said yes. Cool. All right, sure. Yeah, let's try to figure this out. You know what I mean? To your point.
Yeah. I mean, it will happen. Cause I've been surprised sometimes when people had said yes, it's like, oh my gosh, I did not expect that to happen. And then other times though, I will say I'll reach out and they're just like, no. Right. Well, some of them have said just straight up no. Some of them have, just not said anything at all.
Just ignored.
Right. So, now it's mostly through email correspondence that I'm connecting, that I'm reaching out. Maybe it's a different method, right? Maybe it is more of a DM type of thing that I should look into doing. So I will say, okay, on that side of things, I'm not sure how long ago you started your show too. It seems that now, and I'm just going to throw out all the resistance concerns that other people are thinking, because I know people are thinking the thing I'm thinking is everybody has a show. Everybody has a show. Okay, we'll just say AKA. And when you're pitching some of these people to be on your show, I'm sure they've been asked lots of times to be on lots of shows. So why would they pick my show? And so I sit there and say, okay, so I'm throwing that out there. Some of this can be self-defeating thought behavior, right? Of why we don't even ask in the first place. But your whole argument is ask. You never know what's going to happen, I'm assuming.
Yep.
And going back to that concern of how do you fight the idea that some of these people are being asked to be on show after show after show, how do you kind of stand out to help them pick you over something else?
To me, the name of the game is credibility. I want to give them, in as succinct a message as possible, the most information that they can get to make a decision without having to do any further research. If they want to do further research, they obviously can, and I will give them a link to be able to go do further research. But I'm not going to send them a freaking book to convince them that they should come on my show. I'm just going to look for those little credibility pieces that will make them go like, oh, well, if it's good enough for these people, it's good enough for me. So at this point, the majority of my reach out message is just me looking to see who that person already follows or knows, likes, and trusts, who I've already had on my show. And at this point, I have 500-600 names that I can draw from, and I can start throwing in different names depending on what's important to that person. So if it's an author, I'm like, okay, well, I've had Dr. Nicole LaPera, I've had James Clear, I've had Mark Manson, I've had, here's 10 massive New York Times bestselling authors that I've had on my show. Would you like to come on? well, at that point, they're looking at it like, oh, well, I know a couple of these people. If it's good enough for them, it's probably good enough for me. I don't have to like worry about, well, how long you been around? How many downloads do you have? And all these other questions. And I got to go to Google and see what this guy's all about. It's like you're borrowing trust from the people that they already know, like, and trust. And that credibility gives you the yes. Now, when you're first starting, you obviously don't have that. And when I was first starting, I didn't have that either. And that's why I think it's relevant to mention that, like, again, I was starting from scratch when I started this. I had never met a millionaire, let alone had a personal relationship or close friendship with one. So when I was starting, like, sometimes you just gotta start reaching out. You know, it's just that idea of the law of averages. I first heard this from Jim Rohn back when I was doing a lot of sales. But it's like, you reach out to 10 people, you might get one, but the law of averages says you'll always get one when you reach out to 10, and whatever that number comes out to, right? If it's 1 out of 20, if it's 1 out of 30, if it's 1 out of 40, whatever that number comes out to, it will happen at some point. Somebody will say yes at some point. The problem is most people make their decision off of too small of a sample size. So they'll go, oh, I had these 5 people in mind to do the show and none of them got back to me. I guess I'm not going to be a podcaster. It's like, well, try 50, try 100, and then get back to me. Because what happens is, after the first person says yes, it's easier to get the second one to say yes. After the second one says yes, it's easier to get the next 2 to say yes. After the 4 people say yes, it's easier to get to 8. It's easier to get to 16. It's easier to get to 32. And now, like I said, at this point, for me, it has become like this snowball effect that just, now if I can get a message in front of somebody and I know that they'll actually see it, I know I got like a 50-50 shot at this point. Like, my odds have significantly increased, because that's what happens with the law of averages. The more you reach out, the better you get at reaching out, and the more credible you become, because you already have a list of names to pull from. So that average is now like, well, now it used to be 1 in 20 would say yes. Now it's 1 in 15. Now it's 1 in 10. Now it's 1 in 5. And for me, like, now it's 1 in 2. And I still get rejected a lot, but, like, I don't know, if you're not okay with rejection, then, like, don't be an entrepreneur, don't be a podcaster, don't take any risk in life, and be okay with mediocrity forever. Because, like, overcoming rejection is the core common denominator of every single successful person I've ever spoken to in my life. So if you can't get over that, then you probably shouldn't be doing this to begin with. And you're going to get rejected. And sometimes you might get rejected by people who hurt a little bit more than other people, where you're like, man, I really care about that person's opinion of me because I hold them in such high regard, and they said no to my show. That sucks. Okay, great. But no is just a not yet. If you really want that person, like, all you got to do is go like, okay, not yet. Well, what will happen eventually? I've had some people that said no to me that took me 14 months, 18 months, 2 years for them to come on my show eventually. But eventually they said yes, because, like, I was persistent and continued to do it. And my show kept progressing in the meantime. And that's what people want to see. They want to know that, like, you're going to do well, regardless of if it's through me or not through me. And eventually they want to just get on the train. It's like, you have to give people this idea that the train's leaving the station without, like, with or without them. It's like, I'd love to have you on board the train, but if you don't want to jump on the train, we're still leaving. Like, we're still going places and taking off. And so at some point they're just like, well, man, shoot, like, this Travis kid is, not only does he continue reaching out to me like once a month to give me an update about his show, but every time he reaches out to me, the update's pretty good. It's like, oh, well, you got 3 more people that I know, like, and trust to say yes in the meantime. And you look at the stack of proof over like 8, 9, 10 months. It's like, I mean, at this point, I'm just saying yes because I respect the kid's hustle. You know what I mean? And, like, so you get people start saying yes that way. And like I said, then you start building relationships with good publicists and PR firms, because they know that you're going to take care of their clients. So, like, some of the, like, better interviews that I've gotten, and especially in the business world, they've been people reaching out to me at this point. Like, John Maxwell came on my show. He's written 87 freaking New York Times bestselling leadership books or whatever. Tillman Fertitta, the billionaire owner of the Houston Rockets, who's built the highest valued privately held company in the world. It's worth like $5 billion. He never took a dime of outside capital, and he was 100% owner of the company, which is wild. And then bought the Houston Rockets for cash for like $2.5 billion. Tillman Fertitta, John Maxwell, Marshall Goldsmith, bestselling author. All of these people were people I've gotten on my show from publicists reaching out to me because this person's coming out with a book and they know that I'm going to do a good job with the interview. So, like, like I said, it becomes this snowball effect where not only does it become easier for you to book the guests when you're reaching out and doing cold reach outs to people who don't know you, but also you have people reaching out to you. Then you're meeting people at events, you're speaking at events, people want to be on your show. They start recognizing like they want to be put on that same pedestal as Shaq. And now I've had Rob Dyrdek and Dane Cook and, you know, different people from the comedy world, the sports world, entertainment world, entrepreneur world, author world. So it's like pretty much whenever I reach out to somebody, I know I have at least some sort of a chance of them saying yes. And now I'm kind of in that final nut to crack, which is kind of the like influencer YouTuber world, just because I'm trying to grow a bigger YouTube audience right now. So that one's been a little bit tougher to get into. My point is to say that like, if you don't ever start the asking, you'll never get to the snowball portion of it. And at the beginning, it's a heavy lift because nobody knows who you are. Just like nobody knew who I was when I started. And still a ton of people don't know who I am. It's not like my show's Joe Rogan, you know what I mean? Like, but you know, one by one, people start to know who I am. So at some point you just got to start, recognize it's going to be a heavy lift and it's going to be an uphill battle. But if you commit to the long term of it, you know, there's no reason why you can't also do it, even if there are a ton of shows out there. And for those of you that say that, by the way, I know this is a really long-winded answer, so excuse me. For those of you who say like, oh, there's too many shows and it's not going to work and whatever, there's 500 million blogs in the world, and like people still start blogs all the time and they still do well. You know, there's 35 million YouTube channels out there. People still start YouTube channels and they still do really well. 500,000 books come out every single year. But you don't see any authors being like, oh, there's too many books, guess I shouldn't write one. You know what I mean? There's 2 billion people on Instagram, but you still got one of those. There's 2 billion people on TikTok, but you still got one of those. There's 2 billion people on Facebook. You still got one of those. You know what I mean? It seems so odd to me because podcasting is the one that people always say is oversaturated. When you look at the numbers, I just gave you all the numbers for all these other platforms. There are 4 million total indexed podcasts in existence today from data from Spotify. 4 million total podcasts. Of those, there are only 500,000 that are actually actively releasing episodes in the last 30 days. The total number of active podcasts has not grown since 2020 because most people don't stick with it. Most people don't start one because they think it's saturated. And most people don't realize how much work it is to continue hosting a good show. So, and then they don't see the numbers in the first 6 months, so they give up and it goes away. So there are less than 500,000 total active podcasts. And I just gave you the numbers on all the other forms of content out there. So it's like, podcasting is really still, to me, like the bluest ocean that exists in all of the content creation world, even compared to these things with massive budgets like Netflix and HBO and all these other places where content's being created. It's like podcast is actually like one of the least saturated areas, you know what I mean? Even though it appears that it's not.
Yeah, that's really smart. And if nothing else, even if I'd be stupid not to put these out into the world, but even if I didn't put them out into the world, it gives me practice talking, like networking, connecting, asking questions.
Asking questions is a huge
education, learning, like I cannot tell you how good this has been for me just over the course of the 3.5 years I've been doing this now, you know? So, and it's all about consistency.
Let me see if I can find this quote. I was just reading this book. Oh yeah, there it is. From Dr. Peter Attia, he's a former Johns Hopkins educated cancer surgeon turned like kind of health wellness practitioner, content creator. And I just finished his book Outlive, which I highly recommend, by the way. Very, very good book. But in the acknowledgments in his book at the very end, I was at the gym. So I was just like listening to the audiobook and it finished and I didn't, move to my phone fast enough to skip through the acknowledgments. But I'm glad I didn't, because I heard him say this. He said, and I wrote it down. He said, "This is why my podcast exists. It's a forcing function that requires me and my staff to learn at a breakneck pace. The knowledge I gain each week through interviewing experts has also informed much of what you just heard in this book." So like, wrote a New York Times bestseller on how to live a long and healthy life. He's a Johns Hopkins educated cancer researcher and surgeon. He insanely smart, very intelligent. And even he's sitting there going like, the reason my podcast exists is because it forces me to learn at a breakneck pace. That's a crazy thing to say from somebody who's as educated and intelligent as he is. And then for him to say that like the majority of what you just heard in this book is informed by the people that I have on my podcast because of how much I learned from it. And it was just like, man, it's good to hear confirmation from people that are just wildly, like I said, intelligent, smart, successful in those areas sometimes. Cause like, sometimes I feel like I'm crazy because I'm telling people and then they still don't do it. And I'm like, all right, whatever. It seems like it's working for me. Maybe it doesn't work for everybody. And then you hear someone like that say, and you're like, yeah, see, I knew that there was something to this game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're not totally lost, man.
Yeah.
You're not totally lost.
only
Something's working. Tell me really quick about Guestio. Tell us about what it is and why I would use it.
So I initially started Guestio as a way for podcasters to connect with higher quality guests, because those questions we've been talking about, how do you go get these people on your show, were questions that frankly, like, it just takes a lot of hard work. Like we just said, it takes hundreds of repetitions and lots of rejection, and most people just don't want to go through all of that. So I was like, if there were a marketplace that existed where you could just like pay a speaking fee, like people do it for events all the time, but for your podcast, it was like, I would be a customer. And I looked for it, didn't exist. And so we created it. And then along the way, we kind of figured out that that more people were willing to pay for the opposite. More people wanted to be a guest on shows than people who had shows wanted to pay for guests. And so we ended up opening up the show side of the marketplace. So now it's a two-sided marketplace. If you go into Guestio, you can be a show booking a guest, or you can be a guest booking a show, and you can do all of that by yourself. And then we also have a concierge service on the back and an agency where we represent shows and help them book guests, or we represent guests and help them get booked on shows. So we do both of those, both on the software level, do-it-yourself version, and agency level done for you.
How do I know that I'm getting anybody worth having on my show if I go to Guestio?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of the idea behind the paid part of the marketplace, is like, you don't have to pay for guests. So there's two ways you can do it. One way, you can go just book them directly with their booking fee. The other way is you pay $97 a month and you can pitch up to 50 people per month for free. So they can respond and be like, okay, sure. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. You know what I mean? If the show sounds good, the host sounds good, then I'll go ahead and do this one for free. But there's a lot of really great deals on there for people who are $100, $200, $300. We have former professional athletes. That was the thing that was the problem I was trying to solve, was that like, I would go to some of these other marketplaces that exist, and it was just like, they're great people, don't get me wrong, but it was nobody that I really wanted to have on my show that were on these other platforms. And so that's why we introduced the fee, because it's like, at the end of the day, podcast guests, you have to answer one question for them. It's not about how many downloads you have. It's not about how many ratings, reviews you have. It's not about any of the metrics people think matter. The only metric that matters is, are you going to waste my time? Well, there's one really, 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 really easy way to make sure you don't waste somebody's time, and that's to pay them for it. So we basically just answer that question where it's like, and anybody that's paying $300 for a guest, you can at least expect that they're going to come to the table with a certain level of quality, right? Like I've been on a bunch of shows for free, man, where they don't know anything about me. They have to ask me about me before we even hit the record button. They don't even know what I do. It's the questions they ask are garbage. They have, they release one episode every month or two. It's just terrible. And it's a complete waste of time. And so I understand why a lot of people don't say yes to going on podcasts, because you have one negative experience like that, and you don't need to go on other shows, then you're just going to be like, no, screw that. I'm not going to spend my time doing that. So yeah, like if somebody's paying, for instance, my fee on Guestio is like, I think $50 or $90 or something like that. It has nothing to do with like, I'm going to retire off of my Guestio money. It only has to do with like, if I don't know you from Adam and your show's pretty brand new and there's no way for me to gauge whether this is going to be a waste of my time or not, if you pay $50, I know you're not going to waste my time, because it just tells me something about you, that you're willing to pay. You're taking it seriously. Like, you probably are going to come prepared with questions. Like I said, $50 isn't breaking anybody's bank, but it does tell me whether or not you're going to actually take my time seriously, which is a big deal to me and a big deal to a lot of other people. So that's why there's a lot of good deals on there, because like, people aren't on there to make their $25,000 speaking fee. They want to go on podcasts. People want to do this. It's an objectively good activity, especially if you have something to promote. You're an author, an entrepreneur, a coach, a consultant, a business owner, whatever. You have something to promote. It's a good idea to go on podcasts. They want to do it. They just don't want to waste their time on crappy shows. So that's why we implemented that fee there.
Amen, man. And back of my head, in the back of my mind, I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, I do not want to waste Travis's time today. Like I as a guest, I'm sitting there saying that too, Yeah. So I hope that you rambling off those things weren't like a passive aggressive way of me saying that my questions sucked and that my show sucked. So I appreciate,
No,
So-
not at all, dude. It's just that I've done this like 500 times now. So sometimes when I get rolling, it's difficult for me to stop.
Okay.
So just tell me
Like
to
a
shut
freight
up, cut
train,
me
man.
off, and be like, "Hey,
You're like
stop
a
it."
freight train. No. I'm not going to tell you to shut up, man. No, it's all good. Dude, this has been so good. Like, the host learns the most, right? Like, it's just been so good learning from you. My audience, I know, is going to learn a lot from this too, because my audience is a carbon copy of me somewhat, and a lot of things that we're doing. And I found a lot of value. I know they will too, man. So
Glad to hear, man.
connecting with you, how do they do it?
Yep. Instagram at Travis Chappell. You can go to travischappell.com, or if you're listening, whatever podcast app you're listening on, you're watching on YouTube. My show is called Travis Makes Friends. So you can find that on wherever podcasts are available.
And it's awesome. You run a really good show, man. Your sets look beautiful.
Appreciate
your
it.
guests, you have a real good conversations on there. And I just realized something really stupid, that your name is Chappell and you were like raised for the first half of your life in a church.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I know you get it all the time, man, but it just hit me. So anyway, we'll just end it on that note. Thanks for being here, man.
Appreciate it, man.
Been
Thanks for
good
having me.
having
It was
you.
a lot of fun.
Thank you for joining me today on How They Do That. If you found this helpful, please rate the show wherever you listen to podcasts. You see, I help you, you help me. That's how it works. Oh, and please do not keep this to yourself. Share the show with a fellow coach who could also use these insights. Keep exploring, my friends. Never stop asking, how'd they do that? Because with every question, you get closer and closer to refining your business and scaling your impact.